Hello everybody, welcome to the video lecture on the story Out of Business by R.K. Narayan. Let's begin with a short introduction to the author. R.K. Narayan is perhaps one of the most legendary writers in Indian English literature. His stories are mostly set in the fictional town of Malgudi. Narayan's works are noted for its wry humor and ironical perspectives on life. His characters are drawn from the world around, and his narratives are noted for its simplicity and realism. His major works include Swami and Friends, that was published in 1935, The English Teacher in 1945, The Financial Expert in 1952, The Guide in 1958, The Painter of Science in 1977, and A Tiger for Malgudi in 1983. Narayan was the recipient of Sahitya Akademi Award in 1958 and was honored with the Padma Bhushan in 1964 and the Padma Vibhushan in 2000. Now let's move on to a detailed reading and analysis of the story. Out of Business by R.K. Narayan. Little over a year ago, Ramarao went out of work when a gramophone company, of which he was the Malgudi agent, went out of existence. He had put into that agency the little money he had inherited as security. For 5 years, his business brought him enough money, just enough to help him keep his wife and children in good comfort. He built a small bungalow in the extension and was thinking of buying an old baby car for his use. And one day it was a bolt from the blue, the crash came. A series of circumstances in the world of trade, commerce, banking, and politics was responsible for it. The gramophone company, which had its factory somewhere in northern India, automatically collapsed when a bank in Lahore crashed, which was itself the result of a Bombay financier's death. The financier was driving downhill when his car flew off sideways and came to rest 300 feet below the road. It was thought that he had committed suicide because the previous night his wife had eloped with his cashier. Ramarao suddenly found himself in the streets. At first, he could hardly understand the full significance of this collapse. There was a little money in the bank and he had some stock on hand. But the stock moved out slowly, the prices were going down, and he could hardly realize a few hundred rupees. When he applied for the refund of his security, there was hardly anyone at the other end to receive his application. The money in the bank was fast melting. Ramarao's wife now tried some measures of economy. She sent away the cook and the servant, withdrew the children from the fashionable nursery school, and sent them to a free primary school. And they let out their bungalow and moved away to a very small house behind the market. Ramarao sent out a dozen applications a day and wore his feet out looking for employment. For a man approaching 40, looking for employment does not come very easily, especially when he has just lost an independent, lucrative business. Ramarao was very businesslike in stating his request. He sent his card in and asked, "I wonder, sir, if you could do something for me. My business is all gone through no fault of my own. I shall be very grateful if you can give me something to do in your office." "What a pity, Ramarao. I am awfully sorry there is nothing at present. If there is an opportunity, I will certainly remember you." It was the same story everywhere. He returned home in the evening. His heart sank as he turned into his street behind the market. His wife would invariably be standing at the door with the children behind her, looking down the street. What anxious, eager faces they had! So much of trembling, hesitating hope in their faces. They seemed always to hope that he would come back home with some magic fulfillment. As he remembered the futile way in which he searched for a job and the finality with which people dismissed him, he wished that his wife and children had less trust in him. His wife looked at his face, understood, and turned in without uttering a word. The children took the cue and filed in silently. Ramarao tried to improve matters with a forced heartiness. "Well, well, how are we all today?" To which he received mumbling, feeble responses from his wife and children. It rent his heart to see them in this condition. There at the extension, how this girl would sparkle with flowers and a bright dress. She had friendly neighbors, a women's club, and everything to keep her happy there. But now she hardly had the heart or the need to change in the evenings, for she spent all her time cooped up in the kitchen. And then the children. The house in the extension had a compound and they roamed about with a dozen other children. It was possible to have numerous friends at the fashionable nursery school. But here the children had no friends and could play only in the backyard of the house. Their shirts were beginning to show tears and frayes. Formerly they were given new clothes once in 3 months. Ramarao lay in bed and spent sleepless nights over it. So as the story begins, we see that Narayan introduces the crisis right in the beginning. From a blissful life that is couched in luxury, Ramarao and his family are hurled into a whirlpool of troubles. And Ramarao feels responsible for his family's predicament and tries very anxiously to get a new job. However, as his attempts fail, we see an air of despondency settling over the entire family, not just Ramarao, but the wife and the children as well. The immense pressure on Ramarao is brought out through the pain he feels when he sees the dejected faces of his wife and children. He tries to, insert some fake heartiness, or he tries to, get them into good humor by faking a certain sense of heartiness or joy or merriment, but that too fails miserably. So by showcasing the sudden change in fortune, Narayan highlights the whimsical nature of fate. He brings in the subtle nuances of human behavior by commenting on how the family tackled their misfortune. We'll continue with the story. All the cash in hand was now gone. Their only source of income was a small rent they were getting for their house in the extension. They shuddered to think what would happen to them if their tenant should suddenly leave. It was in this connection that Ramarao came across a journal in the Jubilee reading room. It was called The Captain. It consisted of 4 pages and all of them were devoted to crossword puzzles. It offered every week a first prize of 4,000 rupees. For the next few days, his head was free from family cares. He was intensely thinking of his answers, whether it should be tallow or fallow, whether bad or mad or sad would be the most apt, for the clue which said, "Men who are in this had better be avoided." He hardly stopped to look at his wife and children standing in the doorway when he returned home in the evenings. Week after week, he invested a little money and sent down his solutions, and every week he awaited the results with a palpitating heart. On the day a solution was due, he hung about the newsagent's shop, worming himself into his favor in order to have a look into the latest issue of The Captain without paying for it. He was too impatient to wait till the journal came on the table in the Jubilee reading room. Sometimes the news agent would grumble, and Ramarao would pacify him with an awkward, affected optimism. "Please wait. When I get a prize, I will give you 3 years' subscription in advance." His heart quailed as he opened the page announcing the prize winners. Someone in Baluchistan, someone in Dhaka, someone in Ceylon had hit upon the right set of words, not Ramarao. It took 3 hours for Ramarao to recover from the shock. The only way to exist seemed to be to plunge into the next week's puzzle that would keep him buoyed up with hope for a few days more. This violent alternating between hope and despair soon wrecked his nerves and balance. At home, he hardly spoke to anyone. His head was always bowed in thought. He quarrelled with his wife if she refused to give him rupee a week for the puzzles. She was of a mild disposition and was incapable of a sustained quarrel, with the result that he always got what he wanted, though it meant a slight sacrifice in household expenses. One day the good journal announced a special offer of 8,000 rupees. It excited Ramarao's vision of a future tenfold. He studied the puzzle. There were only 4 doubtful corners in it, and he thought he might have to send in at least 4 entries. A larger outlay was indicated. "You must give me 5 rupees this time," he said to his wife, at which that good lady became speechless. He had become rather insensitive to such things these days, but even he could not help feeling the atrocious nature of his demand. 5 rupees was nearly a week's food for the family. He felt disturbed for a moment, but he had only to turn his attention to speculate whether hope or dope or rope made most sense, for some people prefer this to despair, and his mind was at once at rest. After sending away the solutions by registered post, he built elaborate castles in the air. Even if it was only a share, he would get a substantial amount of money. He would send away his tenants, take his wife and children back to the bungalow in the extension, and leave all the money in his wife's hands to manage for a couple of years or so. He himself would take 100 and go away to Madras and seek his fortune there. By the time the money in his wife's hands was spent, he would have found some profitable work in Madras. On the fateful day of results, Ramarao opened the captain, and the correct solution stared him in the face. His blunders were numerous. There was no chance of getting back even a few annas now. He moped about till the evening. The more he brooded over this, the more intolerable life seemed. All the losses, disappointments, and frustrations of the life came down on him with renewed force. In the evening, instead of running homeward, he moved along the railway station road. He slipped in at the level crossing and walked down the line a couple of miles. It was dark. Far away the lights of the town twinkled, and the red and green light of a signal post loomed over the surroundings a couple of furlongs behind him. He had come to the conclusion that life was not worth living. If one had the misfortune to be born in the world, the best remedy was to end matters on a railway line or with a rope. Dope, hope, his mind asked involuntarily. He pulled it back. None of that, he said to it, and set it rigidly to contemplate the business of dying. Wife, children, nothing seemed to matter. The only important thing now was total extinction. He lay across the lines. The iron was still warm. The day had been hot. Ramarao felt very happy as he reflected that in less than 10 minutes the train from Trichinopoli would be arriving. So in this section we see how Ramarao's despair and dejection lead him to take refuge in crossword puzzles, because he believes that this will offer him a chance to win some cash that will lead him out of his misery. Okay, so you have to note that he is not trying to take part in the crossword puzzle competition out of selfish reasons. He desperately wants to rescue his family. So Narayan definitely brings out the myriad ways in which man tries to seek out the elusive hope that can end his misfortunes. So the reader can also see a shift in Ramarao's character. From a kind and worried family man, he transforms into a selfish and solitary man who is consumed by his obsession. Okay, he thinks that the crossword puzzles can solve his problems. He begins out like that. But then he becomes totally obsessed with the crossword puzzles, and he doesn't even bother to look at his wife and children. He doesn't see the misery that he is causing them. So he turns a blind eye to the apprehensions of his wife, as he believes that he is destined to win the competitions. Every week he is sure that he is going to win. And you feel sorry for Ramarao in a certain way, because he is driven by his insecurities and fears. He is desperate to win, as that will validate his hope that his future can be redeemed. As all his hopes come crumbling down, he's unable to take the pressure and decides to end his life. He had given a lot of importance to the big crossword puzzle competition that would have fetched him 8,000 rupees as a prize. But as he realizes that his answers are all wrong and that he wasted a lot of money, 5 rupees was about the cost of food for a week for the family. Okay, so he realizes that he has committed such a big blunder, and then he just gives up. So Narayan's keen insight into human nature is brought out through the actions of Ramarao, because the minute he realizes that he's made a big blunder, he sort of gives up hope and decides to end his life. Ramarao, you can see him vacillating between hope and despair. And when the crisis reaches a culmination, he decides to take the coward's route out. He decides to commit suicide. And now we reach the final part of the story. He lay there, he did not know how long. He strained his ears to catch the sound of the train, but he heard nothing more than a vague rattling and buzzing far off. Presently he grew tired of lying down there. He rose and walked back to the station. There was a good crowd on the platform. He asked someone, "What has happened to the train?" "A goods train has derailed 3 stations off, and the way is blocked. They have sent up a relief. All the trains will be at least 3 hours late today." "God, you have shown me mercy," Ramarao cried and ran home. His wife was waiting at the door, looking down the street. She brightened up and sighed with relief on seeing Ramarao. She welcomed him with a warmth he had never known for over a year now. "Oh, why are you so late today?" she asked. "I was somehow feeling very restless the whole evening. Even the children were worried. Poor creatures, they've just gone to sleep." When he sat down to eat, she said, "Our tenants in the extension bungalow came in the evening to ask if you would sell the house. They are ready to offer good cash for it immediately." She added quietly, "I think we may sell the house." "Excellent idea," Ramarao replied jubilantly. "This minute we can get 4,500 for it. Give me the 500 and I'll go away to Madras and see if I can do anything useful there. You keep the balance with you and run the house. Let us move first to a better locality." "Are you going to employ your 500 to get more money out of crossword puzzles?" she asked quietly. At this, Ramarao felt depressed for a moment and then swore with great emphasis, "No, no, never again." So as the story ends very happily, and we see that Ramarao's decision to end his life is one that is taken out of sheer desperation. He is consumed by the guilt that he had spent quite some money on the crossword puzzles and realizes the enormity of his foolishness. He is crushed by the series of disappointments that he had to face and decides to give up on his life as he doesn't have the courage to go forward anymore. It is by sheer luck that he gets a second chance. What is a second chance? The trains are delayed. Ramarao realizes that he better grab onto this chance, and he also decides to redeem himself. So Narayan points out that hope and despair are just 2 sides of the same coin, and we have to persevere in life rather than give up very easily. Let's look at the setting of the story. The story is set in the fictional town of Malgudi. Narayan narrates the intricacies of life as Ramarao's family is forced to move out of the affluent area near Extension to the not so affluent part of the town near the market. So the decline in the family's fortune is closely mirrored by the change in their settings. From a life of luxury that is indicated by the bungalow, women's club and fashionable nursery school, The family soon has to adapt to a life in a very small house, and the children start going to a free primary school. Thus, the change in fortune brings about a drastic change in the way they experienced life. We move on to the characters in the story. There's just one character, one prominent character, Ramarao. All the other characters are seen from Ramarao's perspective. So Ramarao is the protagonist of the story. He's a hardworking man who cares deeply about his family. But when he loses his fortune due to no fault of his own, he is shattered, absolutely dejected. His confidence wanes as he suffers a series of setbacks. And then his character also undergoes a change. He transforms into a dejected, depressed man who develops an unhealthy obsession. But even this obsession was initially perceived as a solution to help him conquer his financial insecurities. However, Ramarao succeeds in defeating his desperation, and then he decides to seek new opportunities to improve his fortune. Another character that you see is Ramarao's wife, who is described as a very mild woman. She doesn't get, to utter many dialogues, but we see that she's a very meek, quiet woman who only wants her husband to be happy and who quietly looks out for her family. Finally, we come to the themes of the story. The first theme is the vagaries of fate. The story narrates how man's fortune can change in the span of a second. Narayan ironically observes how life will suddenly take a turn for the worst, and when you least expect it. Ramarao undergoes a sudden change in fortune, a very drastic change in fortune, and this deeply changes the way in which he perceives his own life and his own fate. From a life of surety and comfort, he's forced to eke out a living, and this sort of corrodes or destroys his happiness. Life is unpredictable, and it is up to man to never give up hope and to continue fighting till the end. The next theme is hope and despair. Ramarao, you can see him, constantly fluctuating between hope and despair. So as his confidence in life erodes, he slowly becomes more brooding and bitter. His despair reaches its peak when he loses the crossword competition that had 8,000 rupees as the first prize. And then, he decides to end his life as he sees himself as a failure. Fortunately, he is able to conquer this mood and decides to cling on to the hope that life will offer him other possibilities in the future. So Narayan seems to be saying that there's always hope and despair in the long journey that we call life, and that one shouldn't just give up just because we are faced with few obstacles in life. We should keep on hoping for the best. I hope all of you understood the story. Thank you.